Hi, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Development Committee, 19th of December 2019. Our usual emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit to the chamber. Our assembly point will be in the public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please don't delay your evacuation by collecting any belongings. Please don't return into the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please also note that the meeting will be audio recorded, and if you have your mobile, turn it to silent or off, please. Thank you. Apologies for absence and substitute members. We have apologies from Councillor Eves, who will be substituted by Councillor Mrs Mason, Councillor Weston, who will be substituted by Councillor Mrs Gooding. Thank you. Non-members attending, I see we have Councillors Lumley, Wilkinson and Dray. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of November 2019, subject to an amendment on item 4, which needs to include at the top of page 12 that Councillor FD has noted that needs to be noted that he voted against the above decision, which was minute 213, 3 to 45 Alexandra Road, Great Wakering. Other than that, are you happy for me to sign those minutes as a correct and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you. That's item 5, declarations of interest. Councillor Dray. Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs Mason. I think, yeah. I think so. Any others? Councillor Gooding? Yeah, yeah. Okay, right. So on to item 6. Oh, Councillor Lumley.
Do I need to declare an interest? I don't, because
you're not voting. But your membership of the Town Council is declared in public knowledge. Item 6 then, 19 Hawkwell Chase, Hawkwell. There is a tiny little bit of an addendum for that. Has everybody seen sight of that? I'm just noting that this item would normally be delegated, but it comes to committee because of a council connection.
Hi, Chairman. The application is to a site on a corner plot fronting Hawkwell Close, and the application is for a single-storey rear extension which would extend across the entire width of the property. I can take you to the next slide, please. So these are the elevations. So show that the side elevation here and here doesn't have any fenestration on it. All the fenestration is to the rear elevation. It's single storey, it's got a flat roofed form and extends across the entire width. If I can take you to the street scene, you'll see that because the site, and if you just go down one please, because it's on a corner plot, the extension will be visible, but only slightly above this rear boundary fence. Chairman, the application is fairly common for single-storey rear extensions, and the recommendation is one of approval.
Thank you. Does any member actually wish to comment on this? No? Okay. Right, members. I move the recommendation for approval on printed on page 6.1. All those members in favour, please indicate. Thank you. That is unanimously carried. Right. The only other item on tonight's agenda, item 7, a referred item from the weekly list, number 41, Crown Hill, Rayleigh.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, this application relates to a site along Crown Hill, number 41. The application site is situated along the southern side of Crown Hill, outside Rayleigh Town Centre, and situated some 175 metres from Rayleigh train station. This is a reserved matters application. Previously an outline application with all matters reserved was granted planning permission subject to conditions for 5 flats. matters were reserved for a later stage, and the matters reserved relate to access, landscaping, appearance, layout and scale. Therefore, this reserved matters application relates to those matters and seek permission for 2.5-storey building comprising 5 two-bedroom flats, layout, landscaping, car parking and refuse and recycle store. Please note reserved matters application is not an opportunity to re-examine the principal development, which has already been established by the granting of the outline planning permission, and the main issues which require consideration as part of the determination of this application are those matters previously mentioned. Okay, yeah. So this is back that way. Sorry. No, back that way. Sorry. So this is I'm going to show you a few photographs which relate to the application site and its surrounding, just to give you an idea of its context. So this is the neighbouring property. When you're standing looking at the property to the left, if you can go that way for me, please. This is opposite the property. So you can see it's like a 2.5-storey property. It's been sort of extended over time. You can go along. Again, this is opposite the road, 2-storey properties. Go along. Again, there's another 2-storey property. You can see here there's a balcony that's prevalent to the front of the premises. This is opposite the site again. You can go along. And there's further 2-storey properties. You can see there's a mix of sort of low-profile bungalows against 2-storey properties as well as 3-storey. So if you keep going, this is neighbouring property, the opposite side on the right-hand side of the property. This is a bit further down the road towards the train station. So you can see these are 3-storey dwellings. Go along. These are adjacent to the 3-storey block of flats that are opposite the train station. Go along. And again, this is looking the opposite direction, up Crown Hill towards the town centre. So it's just showing you sort of the context of 3-storey dwellings next to this a chalet-style bungalow and 2-storey property. So if you can go along again. Yeah, just another picture of the flats. And these are the chalet-style bungalows on the other side of the 3-storey property. So it kind of gives you an idea of the context of the site. I mean, Crown Hill, the topography slopes sort of towards the town centre and in sort of the towards the rear side as well. If we can go to elevations, please. So just showing you the context of the site, so you've got an idea of what the street looks like. These are the elevations, and given the context of the site, situated within a mix of different style of properties along Crown Hill, it's considered that the appearance, layout, scale is acceptable in this instance. You can go site plan for me. So this site plan before you shows the layout of the site, can show you the car parking, the footprint of the building that's proposed, as well as soft landscaping. So yeah, this plan illustrates soft and hard landscaping to the front that's to be laid out. This would also incorporate 5 car parking spaces. The proposal would utilise an existing vehicle access off Crown Hill. The landscaping proposed and access onto the site is considered acceptable. If we can move on to the visuals. Some visuals have been provided just to give you an idea of what the proposal will look like if planning permission was successful. To round it up, to conclude, the development is considered to be acceptable with regards to neighbouring properties. The amount of outdoor private amenity space is in excess of what is required by the council's housing design guide. The flats proposed do accord with technical housing standards. The refuse and site recycling storage would be kept in a recessed area to the flank of the building. This is considered adequate to store 2 Euro bins and a food waste bin. It's considered that proposal accords with the outline planning permission at this site, which has been approved, and in principle a building to accommodate 5 flats. The layout, scale, appearance, landscaping and the access proposed are considered acceptable and has been recommended positively. Thank you.
Thank you. We have three speakers who've registered with us. Our first is Councillor Lawman. Would you like to come up? For all our speakers, you have 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you've got a minute to go.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just mind turning the mic on.
That's it. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jack Lawman, Raleigh Town Council. The main form of development within this area is a residential in character, containing semi-detached and detached 2-storey dwellings and bungalows, all of which are not uniform in design and are on an elevated position leading to the town centre. Crown Hill is a crescent-shaped road with a residential development boundary of Raleigh and adjoining the conservation area, and the main elevated focal entrance to the town. This property is nearby a local conservation landmark, i.e. the Dutch Cottage. Crown Hill is a very busy and congested highway, and the main entrance to the conservation area of Rayleigh Town Centre, often congested from the High Street to the Rayleigh Town Centre. I'd like to say, if I may, Chairman, that because there's been changes since our original objections, and I did ask permission to just point out a couple of issues. The flats at the bottom, shown as indicated in the photograph shortly, just there, really form right at the bottom of the hill, opposite the station, and pictorially and as an entrance to the town don't form part of that illustration. It's right at the bottom, opposite the railway station, and I felt that was slightly misleading. Secondly, there is an issue that we did object to bin storage, but I note that that's been changed during this process. And I'd like to say that where the new bin storage suggested restricts access at the sides of the building, and it would cause difficulty in getting the bins out and bringing them around to the front, which, although cannot be told, it does feel as though there will be a tendency to leave the bins out because it would be easier than putting them in the bins, into the storage. So the Town Council objects to this application because it's an overdevelopment and not in keeping with the total street scene. The proposed plans overlook neighbouring properties. I've already mentioned the bin storage, and there are no allocated spaces for disabled or guest parking. And the principle that we may be able to park elsewhere leads to another concern that the visitors to the town will have nowhere to park because of all the residents being there. And there appears to be an inadequate space for vehicles to manoeuvre on the two parking areas that were near the original bin stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Beckford, who's the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. My name is Mark Beckford, and I am a director of Seven Elms Limited, the developer of the application site known as 41 Crown Hill. It is our intention to replace what is a low-quality, substandard property on a large plot with a modern, contemporary, architecturally designed building, one which is of high-quality specification and appearance. As with other projects we have completed, I firmly believe that the fullness of time will prove that the development will sit well within its environment and will lift the overall appearance of the street scene. We have listened to local opinion as well as the local authority planning department, and as a considerate local developer, we have redesigned aspects of the building to address concerns with regard to scale, appearance and refuse location. By using clever design, we've ensured the building doesn't dominate the street scene. We've used hidden flat roofs. We will excavate the land, stagger the rear aspect, and have lowered the roof of the building to ensure it doesn't overshadow or dominate the neighbouring properties or the street scene in general. We have increased areas of landscaping to the front of the site. Mature green planting will create a mixed environment and a street scene in keeping with its surroundings. Furthermore, the bin store is now wholly integrated within the footprint of the building, completely hidden from view. Our intention to develop 5 flats formed the outline plan application submitted with details of the site layout upon which the footprint of the building was indicated. This was approved earlier this year. This process included Essex Highways approving all aspects of the parking and access arrangements to and from the site. Essex Highways have further approved the same parking and vehicle movement arrangements at reserved matter stage. I should also point out that the drawings do provide for adequate cycle storage on site, a matter which has been missed and raised as a concern by some. In summary, the plans fully comply with all EPOA standards. Crown Hill is also known as the A129, a main road that already contains several flatted developments. Such roads are the preferred choice by most local authorities for the development of flats, given that such locations are generally no longer desirable to families. The site in question lies almost equidistant between the train station and the high street. The road contains a very mixed scene. I hope my comments demonstrate why I firmly believe the development will sit well within its environment and will lift the overall appearance of the street scene. I believe that as a developer, we have acted in a positive and proactive way to mitigate the concerns of local residents and the council at every opportunity. As a local company, we are committed to our community and will act responsibly and considerately throughout every stage of this development. To conclude, these will be high quality, well-built homes in the right location, built by local tradespeople and businesses, providing quality, desirable housing for the local community. One thing in response to what was said a moment ago, I appreciate the larger block of flats is at the bottom of the hill. It is within eyesight of the site. At the top of the hill, the sort of entrance or gateway, as I think is referred to the high street, I believe ever so slightly down from the main high street is another block of flats which has been there several decades with maybe even flat roofs actually. So flats are very much part of that road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Hind.
My name's Phil Hind and I live at 45 Crown Hill, right next to the development plot. Outline planning permission to demolish the existing two-bedroom bungalow and construct a two-storey block of 5 two-bedroom flats was granted by Rochford District Council based solely on a suggested plan view of the site, with matters regarding access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale being reserved. 7 neighbours objected when these plans were submitted. The first REM application provided further information of the proposed development. This submission was significantly larger than that approved in the OOP. Most significantly, it was for a 3-storey building. 14 neighbours objected to the plans this time, prompted by the colossal size of the proposal, and Rochford District Council rightly refused and not withdrew planning permission, citing these reasons. The new REM application was then submitted via a new set of documents. This was the first time that the proposed height of the building had been shown, albeit in metres above sea level. In an attempt to fudge the height of the development, the whole of the 3rd floor has been squashed down onto the 2nd floor, as can be seen in this animation that is now animated. The red lines on this slide show that the remainder of the building retained all of its rejected measurements. 10 neighbours objected at this time. On the 5th of December, a new set of updated plans were lodged, and the following day the council granted planning permission. No opportunity for further comment by neighbours or the public until now. Apart from not addressing the council's reasons for rejecting the first REM, which all still apply, I would like to address some of the additional misleading and or erroneous points made in the Development Committee document regarding the approved second REM. Point 3. OOP was granted for a 2-storey building. All REM plans show 3 storeys. Point 9. As has already been stated, the original REM planning application was rejected, not withdrawn. Point 13. The street scene in this part of Crown Hill consists of semi-detached and 2-storey dwellings, providing a strong architectural cue. Due to the crescent shape of the road, the block of flats in the top and the bottom are not visible from this location. Functional balconies are not found on Crown Hill. Point 22 and 23. 5 parking spaces are insufficient and will cause the same problems seen in the Trinity House development, where residents and visitors are parking in Philpott House. For this development, spaces in Lees Way will be used, as this is easily accessible through an alleyway 20 metres from the development. There is also no provision for trades to park. Point 23. Parking spaces have been specified at the size allowed for exceptional circumstances. The council have tried to justify the use of this sized bay by citing the inclusion of a suitable turning area. This is not valid justification. There just isn't enough space for anything bigger. Point 26. The front 2 flank windows of number 39 are to a lounge, and the proposed development will now completely block the light to this habitable room through those windows. Points 27, 28 and 29. The council have applied their 45-degree test from the middle of the nearest window, rear window, as a result of a recent appeal. The details of this appeal show that an existing part of the development already broke the 45-degree test, and that the proposed extension would not cause any further impact to the neighbours if applied in this way. This development, being a new build, does not justify the 45-degree test being applied in this manner. Besides that, a screen 1.8 metres high and nearly 3 metres wide still constitutes a barrier to the 45-degree test. If the application of the Council's 45-degree test were applied from the edge of the rear window instead of the middle, the depth of the development would have to be reduced by over half a metre, which would reduce the floor space for rooms on the second and third floors. Point 32. A balcony 1 floor up and 1 metre from our boundary still breaches our privacy. Even though there is an opaque screen between us, this will not fully block sound and vision. Amenity space, points 45 and 46. Considering that the rear garden is nearly 300 square metres and the minimum recommended amenity space is 25 square metres per dwelling, there is no real reason to provide any balconies. Point 47. The latest proposed bin storage location will be almost inaccessible due to the parking arrangements and the proposed landscaping. One final point concerning the BAT survey. There is a pond 190 metres from the development which wasn't declared in any of the applications. Can you please show the last slide? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I guess Councillor Wilkinson, you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, members, I know we've heard that certain aspects of this outline planning permission have already been agreed. There are still considerations to be considered in regards to scale and bulk and suitability. Chairman, I've called this application in from the weekly list for 2 reasons. First of all, it's overdevelopment of the site, and second, it breaches council policies. I'm going to start talking about policies. Policy DM1 of the Development Management Plan states that all developments must consider a number of factors. There are actually 13 in total. The following points from that list I'm suggesting have been breached. That is, they've either been forgotten or they've been considered and then completely ignored. Parking. Sufficient car parking in accordance with Policy DM3 and the Parking Standards Design and Good Practice. Second point has been ignored. Avoid overlooking. The third point, a positive relationship with the existing and nearby buildings. Policy DM3. Fourth point, scale and form appropriate to the locality. Also Policy DM3. With regards to parking, Chairman, there was a policy called the Parking Standards Design and Good Practice. This is a national policy adopted by this council in full council on the 17th of December 2010. It has not been updated and it has not been replaced. That policy requires a residential property with 2 or more bedrooms to have a minimum of 2 spaces per dwelling. It then goes further to say that each of these spaces must be a minimum of 5 metres by 2.9 metres. The policy recognises that at times, sometimes there are certain circumstances where a slight variation on that policy may be considered. In recognising this, the policy goes further to say this may be reduced to 5 metres by 2.5 metres in exceptional circumstances only. Well, what are exceptional circumstances, Chairman? Because it doesn't say. So, the Oxford English Dictionary gives us some assistance here by defining the word exceptional as being unusual or uncommon or abnormal or extraordinary. Well, where are the unusual or abnormal or uncommon or extraordinary circumstances here? I've asked this question and I have not yet received a response. That is because there are no exceptional circumstances. In my respectful submission, Chairman, there is a consistent misuse of the ability to vary this policy, who have even cited the bay size in the officer's report as being the minimum permissible size. They are not the minimum permissible size. The minimum permissible size is 5 metres by 2.9 under normal and ordinary circumstances. In addition to the bay size, the number of bays provided are woefully insufficient. The policy requires 2 bays per dwelling. It also requires a quarter of a bay per dwelling for visitor parking. This actually equates to 11.25 spaces at 5 metres by 2.9 metres. This proposal is providing 5 bays at 5 metres by 2.5 metres. In simple mathematical terms, Chairman, the proposal provides a total of 62.5 square metres of parking when it should, if it sticks to the policy, provide 163.125 square metres of parking. That is a shortfall of just over 100 square metres of parking. This development is actually providing 38% of the parking that this policy, our policies, require. Would you regard this as a slight variation, a relaxation, or complete disregard for the policy this council has adopted? Would you mind? Thank you. Look at these slides. On the 19th of July, this year, the previous application was in fact refused. The planning officer on that occasion cited the following reasons for its refusal. Members, Chairman, if you look at the slide, you can see the left-hand slide is a generated image of what the proposal was in July, which was rejected, and the one on the right is the one that the planning department is saying we should accept. So it was rejected for depth, bulk, scale, height, significantly larger than neighbouring properties, out of character with neighbouring properties, over dominance in size, significantly higher, contrary to policy CP1 of the core strategy. With the exception of a couple of windows there, I challenge you to point out the differences between the two. The plot itself measures 14 metres in width, wall to wall. The parking bays, even at 2.5 metres wide, that's the lower width, they take up 12.5 metres in width. Would you mind just moving on to the next slide for me, please? That's it, thank you. So 2.5 metres wide, it takes up 12.5 metres of width. So on the planning portal, there was a chain of emails between the planning officer and an officer from the principal street scene about the bins. The bins to be provided are 360 litre sized bins measuring 0.6 metres in width. Due to the location of the bin storage on the opposite side of the building from the front door, that requires two paths, one to the front door, one to the bin storage. If you accept it's going to take probably a metre width path to the bin storage to take a 0.6 metre bin down, well, simple maths leaves a half a metre to the front door. Well, that doesn't allow anything for wheelchair access, doesn't allow anything for pushchairs, doesn't allow anything at all. Chairman, members, in summary, I've pointed out to you the clear breaches in our council policy. I've demonstrated to you that even with the clear breaches, the size of this plot is still too small and the parking cannot be provided. And even with 38% of the required parking, they still can't provide two decent-sized footpaths. This is a clear example of a massive overdevelopment of this site where the developers, with respect, are only interested in maximising their profits. Once they've completed their work, they will walk away, leaving an unacceptable situation for the residents who live there every day. In addition, Chairman, with respect, I must caution each and every one of you when you make this decision. If you vote to uphold this decision and approve the development, what in effect you're doing is to condone the council ignoring policy which was adopted by full council. You're allowing council policy to be rewritten. And how can we ever stop that in the future? And it will be cited as a precedent. Our council stands on its policies. It is what makes us strong and head in the right direction. The strength of any policy is in the consistency in which it's applied. Consistent every time. If it is bent, warped, twisted, then that policy is dead. Finally, Chairman, the council prides itself on having the interests of the residents at the heart of everything we do. It is on every single agenda published by member services. The officer's report shows over 3 pages of representations, which would be a lot more had the local neighbours' representation not been pasted into one paragraph. It includes an email from me at the outset of this application spelling out the breaches. It was opposed by the Town Council, yet the very next word in the document is the word approve. Residents ignored, local Town Council ignored. How is that putting the residents at the heart of everything we do? I therefore implore you and all the members to refuse and fully reject this application on the grounds that it breaches policy and it's an overdevelopment of the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just point out, obviously Councillor Wilkinson is a visiting member, but he did, during his speech there, intimate that we might not be making a proper decision, and I must point out for everyone here tonight that we will be making a proper decision and we have proper adjudication of our process to ensure...
So, point of order, Chairman, how did I suggest that?
That a proper decision is made. Thank you. I'll have to move on now. Councillor Dray.
Thank you, Chairman. I broadly support the comments of the 3 previous speakers who spoke against the application. In my view, Mr. Chairman, this is a 3-storey development, not a 2-storey development, and that is clearly shown on the rear elevation that was in the plans. In my view also, it's clearly an overbearing site and it's out of character with the street scene. There are proposed 5 flats for 19 possible residents and only 5 parking bays, which clearly insufficient and are too small. In addition, Mr. Chairman, there are no visitor bays. Also, there's no cycle provision to encourage healthy living. I'm also concerned, Mr. Chairman, with regards to the 45% rule that was used in respect of the overlooking of the neighbouring site, and that rule is clearly in favour of the applicant. And I again, Mr. Chairman, recommend that this committee refuse this application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lumley, did you want to say anything? No. Okay, members. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Before I comment on the report and the application before us, I would like to ask some questions of the officers for clarity.
Yeah.
I can't quite see where the bin storage is, so could someone point that out to me, and the access to it? And
It's on this side here, set in.
So-
Inset into the building.
so if they're inset into the building, are these going to be the large 4 foot, 5 foot bins that you normally have for flats, or are they going to be the small ones that are commonly used in a domestic situation?
They're going to be Euro bins, so the big, large bins. I did speak with Waste and Street Scene Department. They recommended 2 Euro bins for the block of flats.
There's only room for 2 bins there.
They're only required to provide 2 Euro bins because of the size of them for the 5 flats.
So could I have some clarification on that? Because usually we've got 3 different types of refuse collection.
Yep.
And yes, you would have 2 bins of those sort for 5 flats, but you can't just have 2 bins when we've got 3 types of collections.
No, the department explained to me that alternative weeks, different wastes collected. So there'll be 2 Euro bins. One will be for one particular waste, there'll be one for another particular waste, and then they would have a wheelie bin for food waste.
And it's there. So this area here is the area that's inset.
Yes, but if they're Euro bins,
Mhm.
how are you going to get access to them?
Well, they dragged down the side, but if planning permission was forthcoming, the officers from that department would have to go out and visit the property and assess it, and the consultation would have to be carried out of them, and they're advised how it would be accessed. But they have advised that 2 Euro bins are required for this site, as well as a wheelie bin for the food waste.
Okay, I don't think we're going to get any further on that. The other question I'd like to ask is, one of the reserved matters was car parking and highways, access basically. Normally, when we have an application of this sort, we have an opinion from Essex Highways. I don't see that in the officer's report. Did you obtain one?
We consulted them, but they didn't comment this time. However, they have commented previously for the outline and the previous reserve matters that we had in this application. They didn't raise any objections. The access is existing. There isn't any control over that. The car parking spaces that are laid out, is a sustainable location. Parking standards do require a reduction in this type of area, but previously they didn't raise any objections to it, and they recommended conditions.
They didn't raise any objections to the access either?
No.
Right. Okay. And just another question, Mr Chairman, if you'll bear with me on this, because it does seem to be a rather complex situation. The outline planning permission that has been granted, as far as I can see, is for 5 flats, correct? Of 2 storeys. It doesn't say 5 2-bedroom flats or 5 1-bedroom flats, it's for 5 flats. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And a total height in together of 2 storeys. So had they been 1-bedroom flats, then you would have expected them to take up less bulk and mass.
Potentially, yes. Like I say, it's only for 5 flats. It didn't express
It
how
doesn't
many.
express the size.
No.
No, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I probably want to speak on it later, but at the moment I'd like to hear what other members feel.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of pointers. Are the flats are actually double bedrooms, what we're talking about, so they will occupy 4 adults?
Some of them can occupy 4, and there are 1 or 2 that can occupy 3. Let's have a look at
What do you mean 1 or 2? How many? What's 1 or 2?
You can see the size of them on the plan.
Yes, so 3 of the flats can accommodate 4, and 2 of the flats can accommodate 3 people.
9,
They're all
there's
two.
20
They're all
20
two bedrooms,
So
but
there's 21 occupants in all.
potentially
Can.
yeah, potentially
Right,
up to
thank
yeah.
you.
I think for the members' clarity, could I just ask you to be precise about the status of the previous application, and then clearly car parking has been the subject of some discussion.
Yeah.
If you could elaborate a little bit further about how your decision on car parking standards was arrived, relating to the location of this
Okay.
one, please.
The previous reserved matters application, it was actually withdrawn. A decision wasn't made. However, a report did go online because it did go on the week list, but it was withdrawn, so a decision was never made. It was withdrawn because of concerns that were previously raised by officers. With regards to the car parking, there are only 5 car parking spaces, so 1 per flat. They do measure to the minimum size bays rather than the preferred size bays. It is a sustainable location. The parking standards do require or do allow for a reduction in car parking. With regards to the size of the bays, they are 2.5 by 5. Like I say, it isn't the preferred measurement; it's a minimum measurement, and we've justified this on the basis that there is adequate turning area within the site, so they can turn within the site and exit the site safely. Also, with this size bays, it requires an excessive amount of soft landscaping that will soften the appearance of the building. So that was another reason for us allowing it. And also there are sort of other examples within the area that has also allowed similar bay sizes. So that was also considered as part of the recommendation for this application. I hope that helps.
And with regard to the location of the property and the proximity to the town centre, and
Oh, right, okay, yeah, it is along Crown Hill. It's 175 metres from the train station. In the opposite direction, you do have the high street, so it is considered a highly sustainable location because of the public sort of services, sort of buses, trains, walking distance to places, and there are plenty of local amenities in the near vicinity. So it is a highly sustainable location. And that's why a reduction of car parking spaces has been accepted in this case.
and the previous application.
It was exactly the same in the previous application as well.
And what happened to it? Was it refused?
It wasn't refused, it was withdrawn. It wasn't refused. It wasn't refused on highway grounds either. But like I say, we did write a recommendation for refusal on design grounds, not on highway reasons. And like I say, that was withdrawn, so a decision was never actually issued for that one.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. One is that do we know whether there are double yellow lines outside the property?
There is W lines all along Crown Hill, so it wouldn't be safe for anyone to park along that road. Also, I have walked around the area, and I know sort of Lee's Way, there were some concerns that people raised about car parking in that area. They are single lines, but there are car parking restrictions because of the railway, the train station. So people wouldn't be able to leave their cars there all day without obviously potentially getting a ticket if so.
Okay, thanks. Second point was about the 45-degree rule. Have we taken, with this particular development, have we taken it from where we normally take from the building, or is it the case that it's from a different position?
It's been taken from the middle, as someone did previously raise earlier about we had a recent appeal decision come in for a site in Little Wakering. This was for a householder extension. The inspector ruled that because our policy or our guideline in the supplementary planning document 2, housing design, isn't specific in saying where we should be taking the measurement from. Okay, historically we've taken it from the edge of the window. However, because it doesn't state that in the guidance, the inspector has gone with that and allowed that application to be the 45-degree rule to be taken from the middle of the window. So that is a appeal decision. It does hold some sort of material weight within any decision that's being made. So in this instance, we have taken it from the middle because of that recent appeal decision.
Yeah.
It's just an observation, actually, that I do accept there are 3-storey buildings, but they're actually at the boundary of Crown Hill. So the properties at the bottom, because they are at the bottom of the gradient, they don't really interfere with anything else. And the properties at the top don't appear to. And what we're looking at here is putting something of effectively 3 stories in the middle. Just an observation.
Okay. Do any members who haven't spoken yet want to speak? I'll come back to Councillor Stanley then. Oh, sorry. Councillor Canal. Oh, right. Oh.
They are clarification points, just continuing from what the officer was saying. Would it be right to say that it was up for recommendation of refusal before it was withdrawn, the application in July, and that's why that appeared on the report?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. And in when you refer to the car parking spaces being to the minimum standards, is that minimum standards in all circumstances or minimum standards in exceptional circumstances, as one of the speakers previously suggested?
I mean, the parking standards do say exceptional circumstances, and Councillor Wilkinson did go through, obviously, definitions, etc. There isn't, unfortunately, a list to say what exceptional circumstances are. However, because of the turn area within site, the amount of soft landscaping that's been provided, we've considered that to be reasons to allow a minimum bay size. As well, there are other examples within the town centre that also recent developments has been allowed of the same bay sizes that have also been proposed, a minimum. So that's why we've allowed it in this instance. Yeah.
Thank you for those clarifications. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Wotton.
Chairman, thank you. We come to these meetings and hear regularly applicants, developers wanting, understandably, to develop a particular area. On the face of it, it looks to me gross overdevelopment in terms of what they're trying to achieve on the site. So we understand a developer's point of view, and they can't be blamed for that in terms of trying to apply all the national framework in terms of planning. But then we hear from 4 people who, in a very rational and unemotional way, present their case using policy examples to support their case. And I have to admire the way that each of them presented their points. But what we end up with as a committee is finding ourselves not quite, well, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for others. I find myself totally drawn in the sense of not actually understanding whether the points that have been made, we obviously have to comply with policy. So in reaching our decision, we have to comply with policy. But we've heard numerous cases where there appears to be examples where this application is at odds with our policy, and it's been very eloquently and articulately supported. So I get really quite concerned that we reach this stage of making a decision on an application when there is clearly what appears to be a void on a whole range of issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you. Just to come back on a couple of points. If we are, as so put by the officer, just to refer that we're now looking from the centre of a window outwards on 45 degrees, that means that all those in the past that we have refused will actually come back to us and tell us, say, well, no, you could have passed that at the centre of the window because it's not at the edge of the window. So we can't adapt ourselves to benefit others because we think it's a nice development. We should carry out what we intend to do from the off, and that is the off. That's the stance we have taken, and that's where we should be, at the edge of the window. Secondly, I have my worries on fire prevention and how that building will actually work in relation to fire hazards and that sort of thing. So, and that to me is another big no-no, because the more people, you've got 21 people going in there, and we all know what that happens. People make mistakes, people do things, and that could lead to a really disaster area, not only for that property, but for properties next door. The other thing that really worries me is that we have policies that in the past have worked for us, and we seem to be mitigating those policies in the way of well, we'll just bend over this way to help, and we'll just bend this way to help that person, and that so on. I do find that we should stick to our policy, we should stick to our guns on what we are intending for developers to go by, and this is another case that we are actually sort of mitigating ourselves rather than bringing policy to fact.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologise for the phone. It's a new one. I don't know how to turn it off. So, I'm not as articulate as some of the previous speakers who I think have spoken exceptionally well and covered a lot of aspects of this application. So forgive me if my summary is less articulate. However, if we look at the items that we are considering, we're not considering, we have permission for 5 flats in this position. But everything else, siting, car parking, access, is reserved. Therefore, we should look at those. Oh, sugar. I usually leave it in the car. The officer's report, if I start that, it was the site and appearance. The officer's report says the residential in character containing semi-detached and detached 2-storey dwellings and bungalows. And this is bungalows and semi-detached and detached. So there's a variation in size, in characteristics, and I think we all know that road quite well. This particular proposal, first of all, it's linear with the adjacent properties, so that variation and characteristic is, and that there's no positive relationship. It will break up that, especially being in the middle. So I do think on sight and appearance, as shown, that it fails. When I go to parking standards, I see no reason at all why our parking standards should not be adhered to. And I'm quite concerned that on a new development, there is no provision for a cycle store, there's no provision for visiting residents, bearing in mind the car park is some distance away and often full up, or for any disabled visitors. I'm concerned from that point of view. The overlooking, again, I think that's been well covered and is an aspect that we should show concern of. It is basically, in my view, bulk and mass that it comes down to, scale and bulk, and it is overdevelopment of this site, in my view. And I would certainly be happy to move for refusal based on the issues that have been raised by various members. If someone would like to second that.
Okay. Would you like to say a few words? And if you can also particularly mention the cycle store, because that is one point.
Yeah. So just to clarify, there is a cycle store proposed, but I don't think we've specifically pointed it out to you. So maybe we'll just do that, just to set minds at rest that at least that point would be accommodated. So there is space to the rear where cycles could be stored. So I would perhaps guard against putting the lack of any cycle provision on site into any reason for refusal. But what I have taken from the points just raised, if I could just summarise, is that okay? The reasons for refusal that I've understood so far. So primarily and perhaps firstly, it's a concern with the scale and massing of this building that's proposed.
The bulk and mass and the overdevelopment, yes, is a primary reason, especially when you look at the comparison between the surrounding areas.
In this particular part of the street scene?
In that particular part of the street scene. The fact that we have approved something in the past and made a mistake doesn't mean that we have to do the same thing again.
Okay. The other... and sorry, in relation to that, I know you mentioned the sort of lack of setback, the fact that the building would be in line with the neighbouring properties, maybe exaggerating that sort of dominance in the street scene. Then you've talked about overlooking and over-dominance.
If you look at the original layout, although there's an approval for 5 flats, they've moved it so far forward, it would grossly change the character of the street scene. And one other thing I am concerned about, which I didn't mention, which, forgive me, is I believe there's a balcony at the front.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a road where you've constantly got traffic queuing and fumes. So one of the reasons sometimes that balconies are put in is to increase the floor space of the flat. And by doing that, and to conform to standards. But who would want to sit on a balcony when there's stationary traffic and traffic there? I don't think, just from a health point of view, I don't know if it's a planning point of view.
I think, just for clarity, Councillor Mr Mason, if you, for officers' point of view and their interpretation of your motion for refusal, if you could just stick to explaining those things.
Yes, well, the balcony was a concern as well.
Okay, sorry. So what I've got so far is a primary reason for refusal number 1 to do with the scale and massing of this development in this particular part of the street scene, taking into account it being brought forward within the site because of the scale of the development process, it being 5 2-bed flats. And the consequent size of the development, therefore.
And the height, yes.
Yes, scale will include height, massing, depth, etc. I wouldn't advise specifically taking issue with the balcony to the front of the, on the basis that it is somewhat personal choice. You know, maybe most people wouldn't want to sit out on a balcony in that location. Some might. I think it being a reason for refusal wouldn't support that general concern about scale and massing in that location.
Thank you. I'll take the officer's advice on that.
But I'll come to the other points though, because we need to be clear about these reasons for refusal. So overlooking and over dominance were mentioned. I think we need to be clear. It is for members to determine whether this development would be acceptable in terms of scale in relation to neighbouring properties. Really, it's only these 2 neighbouring properties that would be directly affected by the proposal. So we'd need to be clear about the overlooking and over dominance. What they have proposed in the application is this privacy screen here, which would be to a height that would obstruct sort of a sort of adult person standing and looking directly into this sort of private area of this neighbouring property here. I know one of the speakers did talk about it being an opaque screen, and that actually that wouldn't completely prohibit this impression of people being there, even if the direct, you know, you can't actually see directly because it's obscured, and potentially your over dominance concerns arise around that more generally. The 45-degree angle wouldn't be breached by the development that sort of the wall, the rear wall, even if you took it from the middle of the window next door, but the screen would. So this screen here to this balcony, you know, would breach that. And so it's just understanding from members about this reason in terms of, is it just this property here? Is it the neighbouring property to the other side as well? To formulate a reason around that.
I think
it doesn't really matter whatever property it is. If it obscures, which it will do, and I do know that if you put an obscure screen up there, it won't give the same format as being open as it would be closed in. So it's just like putting a fence up in any case. So that wouldn't, if it was, that would still, if it did the 45-degree from the corner of the window, then that is our policy, and it would cut across not only that balcony but also the outbuilding that's put there in the first place.
So, right. Councillor Mason, just to go back, because I think you're the person that's sort of primarily putting these reasons for refusal forward. Am I clear that you are concerned about overlooking and over dominance in relation to the neighbouring property to this side?
Because if the balcony mass wasn't so great, they wouldn't need the screening.
Okay. So it's just an unreasonable relationship between those properties.
Yes.
So okay.
Because
right.
though it's been tried to be covered, there wouldn't be the need to cover it if it wasn't over dominant.
Essentially, you're saying it's excessive, and it's excessive.
Right. Yeah, and it's also the height was the other one.
Okay.
That helps you 2.5 or 3.
Sorry, I have got one more.
Go on then.
Because I know you've mentioned parking.
Yes.
So we need to be clear. Is there a reason for refusal around parking being inadequate? I would guard against that reason solely relating to the bay sizes, but I think the broader concern has been with the number of parking spaces proposed. It is in a location that we've sort of acknowledged in the recommendation that you could argue is highly sustainable. There are though large flats proposed. So it's not 5 small one-bed flats, which could be a proposal that might come forward at a later date on the site, and that would still comply with the outline planning consent. It is for 5 two-bed larger properties. So I think your concern is to do with the scale of the properties proposed and the amount of parking, the lack of visitor parking.
The lack of visitor parking, the number of parking spaces, bearing in mind the type of property proposed, and also the fact that the bay sizes, I do not agree with that policy. We have a policy. If this was an existing build, it would be a different issue.
Yeah.
But this is a new build, they should be able to make the bay sizes adequate.
So overdevelopment in essence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And under
Okay.
provision.
Right. So, I'll just come to you in a minute. Are all the members clear about the reasons for refusal that have been stated? Right. We'll just have a couple of members just want to speak on those prior to us going to a vote on this. Councillor Gooding.
Just one other point. Councillor Mason mentioned the disability access as well, which I think should be included.
Disability parking.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. That was my main concern. There's 5 car parking spaces, but there's no parking for disabled people there.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor FD.
Chairman, Councillor Mrs Mason pointed out the bike at the back. Is there access by both sides of the property to the back, or just one? I can't quite make out.
Even with that little... Yeah, there is. Go to the floor plan. Yeah, there is on the floor plan. Sure, the door that goes out there.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just saying, that was one next.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see on the floor plan in front of you, there is a doorway. There will be a gate on the opposite side, on the left-hand side, but you can see on the right-hand side where there's a porch access into the building, there is a door going out the back there.
So if you want to get a bike through, you'd have to actually go through the building.
You can go through the building, or you can go round the side and go up the access where
If
the bin
the
store
bins
is.
are around the other side,
Yeah.
they go over, so you wouldn't be able to get a bike through.
No, they're recessed under
No,
the
it's
building.
recessed
Yeah, they're
area for
recessed
the bins.
enough
Yeah, so you
for the
can
bins
easily
you can get
gain
through.
access to that garden.
Thank you.
Okay, members. Just for my comment prior to us going to a vote, I've sat here quite a number of years, and there are controversial applications that come in front of us, and this is certainly one. The principle of something happening there is not in question. That's sorted out. I'm relatively uncomfortable about the parking as a reason for refusal, because we've been down this route on so many occasions in such a sustainable location, so close to the train station, so close to the town centre with all its bus routes. There are 5 spaces there. Certainly the 3 in the middle are undersized, but you could argue that the 2 on the end with the paths going down the side are acceptable. So I'd be a little bit uncomfortable with that. We've also got a number of members that have been talking about policies as if they're sort of black and white. If our policies were black and white, we wouldn't need the officers sitting by the side of us. Policies get interpreted in all sorts of different ways for all sorts of different reasons, and the officers have interpreted the policies in the way that has led them to make a recommendation for approval on this occasion. In terms of the bulk and scale, well, Crown Hill is a very mixed environment of properties. There are all sorts within easy vision, and I suspect that might be difficult to defend. But the thing that just tips it over for me is that if this was 5 one-bedroom flats, I don't think we'd be where we are now, but 5 two-bedroom flats is a slightly different kettle of fish. So I find this application a very finely balanced judgment, but I'm just persuaded by the scale and mass because they are two-bedroom properties. So on that basis, I will be concurring with the recommendation for refusal that's been put. So members, we are clear about the recommendations. The officers have stated them. I don't think we need to restate those. So it's motion for refusal from Councillor Mason. I took Councillor Wilson as the second hand up, although there are a number of hands. Those members in favour of the refusal, please indicate. Right, that item is refused. So I believe this is the last formal public meeting of this year, so it is Happy Christmas to everyone, and we'll see you in the new year for more of the same. Thank you.